October 15, 1944, dawned cold over the Philippine Sea as Commander Richard O'Kane stood on the bridge of USS Thames, watching the horizon blur between water and sky. In his hand, he held orders that would make history, orders to patrol the waters between Formosa and the Japanese mainland, where enemy convoys moved like blood through the Empire's veins. What the Imperial Japanese Navy couldn't yet fathom was that one submarine, one crew of 80 men, was about to write the most devastating chapter in undersea warfare the Pacific had ever witnessed. The Thames wasn't just another fleet boat. Commissioned on October 15, 1943, exactly 1 year before this fateful morning, she represented the cutting edge of American submarine technology. At 312 feet long and displacing 2,400 tons submerged, she carried 24 torpedoes and a crew trained to near perfection. But statistics alone couldn't explain what was coming. The secret weapon wasn't steel or explosives. It was the man who commanded her. Richard Hetherington O'Kane had learned his trade under the legendary Dudley "Mush" Morton aboard USS Wahoo, where he'd served as executive officer during some of the war's most aggressive patrols. Morton had taught him that submarines shouldn't hide, they should hunt. When O'Kane assumed command of Thames in October 1943, he brought that philosophy with him, refined by his own tactical genius. His eyes were pale blue and perpetually calculating, his manner quiet but absolute. The crew called him the Old Man, though he was barely 31 years old. Tange's first 4 war patrols had already established her reputation. Between January and September 1944, she'd sent 16 Japanese ships to the bottom, an impressive record by any standard. But O'Kane wasn't satisfied. He studied his charts obsessively, analyzing convoy routes, moon phases, and weather patterns. According to declassified naval intelligence reports from the Pacific Submarine Command archives, O'Kane requested specific patrol areas where Japanese shipping was heaviest, volunteering for the most dangerous waters when other commanders sought safer hunting grounds. The 5th Patrol began on September 24, 1944, when Tang slipped out of Pearl Harbor's submarine base. Her destination was the Formosa Strait, a narrow channel between the island of Formosa, now Taiwan, and mainland China. Japanese convoys funneled through these waters carrying oil from the Dutch East Indies, rubber from Indochina, and raw materials essential to the war machine. The Imperial Navy knew these convoys were vulnerable, so they packed them with destroyer escorts and patrol aircraft. O'Kane didn't care. He'd spent the 2-week journey drilling his crew relentlessly. The torpedo crews could reload tubes in under 6 minutes. The diving alarm brought Thames from surface to periscope depth in under 40 seconds. Fire control teams calculated targeting solutions with mechanical computers, while O'Kane called bearings and ranges in his characteristic calm monotone. Every man knew his job perfectly, because perfection was the only thing that kept submarines from becoming coffins. On October 10, 1944, Tang reached her patrol area. The sea was empty, the sky clear. O'Kane ordered the boat to cruise at periscope depth during daylight, surfacing only at night to recharge batteries and search for targets. For 3 days they found nothing. Then, on October 13th, the radar operator's voice crackled through the intercom. Radar contact. Bearing 030, range 15,000 yards. The convoy appeared on the horizon at dusk on October 13th. 1944-7 ships arranged in 2 columns with 3 destroyer escorts weaving protective patterns around them. Through the periscope, O'Kane counted tankers, cargo vessels, and what appeared to be a troop transport. His mind calculated angles and speeds automatically, years of training compressed into instinctive judgment. This wasn't just a convoy, it was a target-rich environment. O'Kane maneuvered Thames into attack position with surgical precision. Unlike commanders who fired from maximum range and fled, he believed in getting close, often dangerously close. Range to nearest target, he asked quietly. 1,200 yards, sir, came the reply from the fire control party. Some captains would have considered this suicidal. O'Kane considered it necessary. At close range, torpedoes had less time to malfunction, and targets had less time to evade. Solution set. Outer doors open. Standby tubes 1 through 4. The submarine trembled slightly as compressed air opened the outer torpedo tube doors. In the forward torpedo room, men stood ready, their faces slick with sweat in the confined space. The temperature inside temps hovered near 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but nobody complained. They were too focused. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. Fire 4. 4 Mark 18 electric torpedoes launched at 8-second intervals, their wakeless paths invisible in the darkening water. O'Kane started the stopwatch in his mind. At 46 knots, the torpedoes would reach the convoy in approximately 52 seconds. He counted silently. I pressed to the periscope. The first explosion illuminated the convoy like daylight. A cargo ship's midsection erupted in flame, the blast so powerful it lifted the bow clear of the water. 7 seconds later, the second torpedo struck a tanker. Orange fire blossomed across the sea as thousands of gallons of fuel oil ignited. The third and fourth torpedoes both hit the troop transport, and O'Kane allowed himself the smallest smile. 3 ships damaged or sinking from one spread was nearly perfect. But the destroyers were reacting. Take her deep, 200 feet. The deck tilted sharply as Tang dove. Seconds later, the first depth charges began exploding above them. The hull groaned under the pressure waves. Light bulbs shattered. Men gripped whatever they could reach as the submarine bucked and twisted. Kane stood calmly at the plotting table, tracking the destroyers by sound alone. For 3 hours, Temps played cat and mouse with the escorts. Kane would creep ahead, then go silent, letting the ocean's thermal layers hide his submarine. The destroyers would pass overhead, dropping charges that grew progressively farther away as they lost contact. Finally, as midnight approached, the sounds of propellers faded. Kane ordered Thames back to periscope depth. The sea was littered with debris planks, oil drums, life jackets floating empty. 2 ships were gone completely. The troop transport listed heavily, clearly doomed. As Tang's crew watched through the periscope, she rolled over and slid beneath the waves. The destroyers had departed, probably rushing the survivors to Formosa. O'Kane ordered the boat surface to recharge batteries and reload tubes. On deck, the air tasted like smoke and oil. Chief of the boat, William Leibold, emerged from the forward torpedo room, his dungarees soaked with sweat. "Tubes reloaded and ready, Captain." O'Kane nodded. It expended 4 torpedoes and sunk 3 ships. 20 torpedoes remained. "We're not finished," O'Kane said simply. The crew understood. They weren't heading home. They were heading deeper into enemy waters. Over the next 2 days, Tang stalked the shipping lanes like a wolf among sheep. On October 15th, Tang's first birthday, O'Kane found another convoy and sank 2 more cargo vessels before the escorts could respond. On October 16th, he intercepted a tanker sailing alone and sent it down with a single torpedo through the engine room. October 23, 1944, found USS Tang operating in waters so dangerous that American Submarine Command had designated them extremely hazardous for patrol operations. The Turnabout Strait, a narrow passage between the Pescadores Islands and the Chinese coast, funneled Japanese shipping through a geographical choke point barely 30 miles wide. The Imperial Navy knew this vulnerability, so they packed the strait with patrol boats, shore-based radar stations, and air patrols that swept the area every 2 hours. Richard O'Kane didn't just enter this hornet's nest, he set up residence. For 3 days, Temps had been hunting in waters where most submarines spent mere hours before retreating to safer areas. The logic was simple but brutal. If the Japanese had to use these waters, then this was where American submarines should be. O'Kane had already added 4 more ships to Tang's tally since entering the strait, bringing the 5th patrol's total to 11 vessels destroyed. But on the night of October 23rd, the hunting reached its crescendo. The radar operator's voice cut through the submarine's humid air. Multiple contacts bearing 270 range 18,000 yards. Count 9. Repeat 9 separate targets. O'Kane moved to the radar repeater, studying the glowing screen. Its expression never changed. But his fingers drummed once against the plotting table, the only outward sign of excitement anyone ever saw from him. Battle station's torpedo. Rig for silent running after refire. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each man to his station, every movement economical and precise. Tang turned toward the convoy, her diesel engines pushing her through the dark water at 17 knots. Kane would attack from the surface tonight, a risky decision that traded concealment for speed and maneuverability. Through the target-bearing transmitter binoculars, O'Kane surveyed his targets. The convoy consisted of a massive tanker, 4 large cargo ships, 3 smaller freighters, and a passenger cargo vessel. Only 2 destroyer escorts protected them, probably all the Imperial Navy could spare given the desperate situation throughout the Pacific. O'Kane's tactical mind dissected the problem. 9 targets, 20 remaining torpedoes, to alert destroyers. The mathematics of destruction? All ahead flank. We're going straight through the middle. Executive Officer Frank Springer glanced at his captain but said nothing. Going through the convoy rather than attacking from outside was audacious to the point of madness, but O'Kane had calculated the geometry. If Tang penetrated between the columns, she could fire to both port and starboard, maximizing targets while minimizing the escort's angles of counterattack. Temps surged forward, salt spray whipping across her bridge. The range counter spun down, 5,000 yards, 4,000, 3,000. The cargo ships loomed like office buildings on the horizon. Still O'Kane held fire, getting closer, always closer. At 1,500 yards point-blank range in submarine warfare, he gave the order. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. Torpedoes leaped from the forward tubes, white trails disappearing into darkness. O'Kane swung the boat hard to port, presenting the stern tubes. Fire 7. Fire 8. Fire 9. The stern tubes coughed their deadly cargo, toward targets on the starboard side. What happened next became legend in submarine warfare. Within 90 seconds, 5 ships erupted in flames. A tanker's bow section detached completely, cartwheeling through the air in a fireball visible for miles. 2 cargo ships collided while attempting to evade, their hulls grinding together before both began sinking. A freighter exploded so violently that debris rained down on Tang's deck, forcing the bridge crew to take cover. But triumph turned to chaos in heartbeats. 1 destroyer escort, Commander Nakajima Suda, had been farther from the convoy than radar indicated. She now bore down on Temps at 32 knots, her searchlight sweeping the water. O'Kane ordered emergency dive, but the submarine's hatches were still open for ventilation. Precious seconds ticked away as lookouts scrambled below. Tang's bow angled sharply downward as tons of seawater flooded her ballast tanks. The depth gauge needle spun clockwise, 30 feet, 50 feet, 70 feet. On the surface above, Suda's searchlight beam knifed through the darkness, hunting for the shadow that had just devastated 5 ships. Commander Nakajima knew his enemy was here somewhere, wounded perhaps, certainly close. His destroyer's sonar pinged frantically, sound waves searching for metal in the water's depths. At 120 feet, O'Kane ordered Temps leveled off. The submarine hung suspended in darkness while chaos raged above. Through the hole, the crew could hear the destroyer's propellers a-grinding. Churning sound that grew louder, then faded, then returned from a different direction. Nakajima was executing a standard search pattern, quartering the area systematically. Sooner or later, sonar would paint Tang's hull, and then the depth charges would fall. But O'Kane had been hunted before. He ordered Temps ahead dead slow on electric motors, barely making way, angling toward the burning wrecks on the surface. His reasoning was counterintuitive. Most submarines fled from such chaos. Therefore, that's exactly where Temps would hide. The burning oil and debris created acoustic interference that might mask the submarine's presence. For 47 minutes, Temps crept through an underwater hell. The temperature inside climbed to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Men stripped to their underwear, sweat pouring off bodies in the oxygen-depleted air. Nobody spoke above a whisper. Every unnecessary electrical system was shut down to conserve battery power and reduce noise. In the forward torpedo room, reloading operations continued in absolute silence. Men passing 60-foot torpedoes by hand, guiding them into tubes using only touch and muscle memory. Above them, Suda's depth charges began falling. The first pattern exploded 300 yards awake close enough that Tang's hull rang like a gong. Cork insulation fell from the overhead in chunks. Pressure gauges cracked. In the maneuvering room, electrician's mate Clayton Decker watched his instruments with wide eyes, ready to report flooding if the hull gave way. The second pattern was closer. One charge detonated almost directly overhead, the concussion lifting Temps bodily and slamming her sideways through the water. In the conning tower, O'Kane grabbed the periscope housing to steady himself. The lights went out, then flickered back on as emergency power engaged. In the after battery compartment, a battery cell cracked, releasing chlorine gas.
Ow.
The crew activated breathing masks, while damage control teams raced to contain the leak. Then, abruptly, the attack stopped. Through the hydrophones, the sound of Suda's propellers grew fainter, finally disappearing entirely. Chief Sonarman Floyd Caverly pulled off his headset and looked at O'Kane questioningly. The captain waited another 10 minutes before speaking. Periscope depth, slow and quiet. Tang rose like a ghost from the depths. 60 feet, O'Kane raised the periscope for a quick sweep. What he saw explained Suda's departure. The second destroyer escort had arrived and was picking up survivors from the burning ships. Nakajima had been recalled to assist. The sea was a chaos of flaming oil, wreckage, and men clinging to debris. O'Kane watched without expression, then lowered the periscope. Surfaced the boat. Still have work to do. Tang broke surface at 0130 on October 24th, 1944. The crew poured onto deck, sucking in fresh air like drowning men. While the diesel engines roared to life, recharging batteries, O'Kane studied the tactical situation. 3 ships from the convoy had escaped, limping toward Formosa at reduced speed. The destroyers were occupied with rescue operations. Tang still had 14 torpedoes remaining. By 0300, Tang was in pursuit. O'Kane pushed the boat to maximum surface speed, racing to intercept the fleeing ships before dawn brought air patrols. The mathematics were tight: 21 knots for Thames versus 12 knots for the damaged freighters across 30 miles of ocean. They would catch them just before sunrise. At 0-5-40-5, with the eastern sky beginning to pale, Tang overhauled the stragglers. Kane attacked from the surface, firing 6 torpedoes at the 3 ships. 5 hit. 2 freighters sank immediately. The third, a cargo vessel carrying rubber from Indochina, caught fire and burned for an hour before capsizing. Tang's crew watched from 2 miles away, counting 17 ships destroyed in 5 days. But O'Kane wasn't satisfied, according to patrol reports now housed in the U.S. National Archives. He radioed Pearl Harbor requesting permission to extend the patrol by 1 week. Command approved. Tang had ammunition, fuel, and food remaining. The hunting would continue. October 25th. 1944 broke clear and calm over the Formosa. Straight perfect weather for air patrols. Terrible weather for submarines. Richard O'Kane ordered temps submerged before dawn, running deep and slow while Japanese patrol planes crisscrossed the sky above. The Imperial Navy knew a submarine was operating in these waters. 17 sunken ships had made that abundantly clear, but they couldn't find her. Tang was a ghost, appearing only to kill, then vanishing into the depths. For 2 days, O'Kane hunted cautiously, balancing aggression against survival. The submarine's air grew increasingly foul as carbon dioxide built up from 78 men breathing in a sealed steel tube. The smell was indescribably: washed bodies, diesel oil, battery acid, cooking odors, and the chemical stink of the carbon dioxide scrubbers working overtime. Men developed headaches, moved sluggishly, spoke in murmurs, but still they performed their duties with mechanical precision. On October 27th, patience yielded reward. At 1500 hours, the periscope watch spotted smoke on the horizon. O'Kane maneuvered to intercept, taking 3 hours to position temps ahead of the target's track. Through the periscope, he identified a large tanker 10,000 tons, at least escorted by a single patrol boat. The tanker was valuable enough to merit protection, but not valuable enough for a destroyer. O'Kane smiled grimly. Battle stations torpedo, its final bearing and shoot. The fire control party worked their mechanical computers, inputting target speed, angle on the bow, and range. At 2,000 yards, O'Kane fired 3 torpedoes. All 3 struck home, the tanker erupting in a fireball so intense that Tang's periscope lens fogged from the heat even at that distance. The patrol boat circled frantically but never located the submarine. O'Kane ordered temps deep and slipped away. 18 ships. On October 29th, Tums intercepted another convoy, this one larger and better protected. 6 freighters, 2 tankers, and 4 destroyer escorts. Normal doctrines suggested avoiding such heavily defended targets. O'Kane saw opportunity. He stalked the convoy for 6 hours, plotting courses and speeds, looking for the moment when geometry favored the hunter over the hunted. That moment came at 2200 hours. The convoy was executing a routine zigzag pattern to frustrate submarine attacks. What? One of the zigs brought them into a configuration where the destroyer escorts were all on the convoy's far side. For perhaps 5 minutes, Tang would have a clear shot. O'Kane surfaced in the darkness, racing ahead of the convoy at flank speed. At 3,000 yards, he swung broadside and fired 6 torpedoes in what submariners called a down-the-throat spread staggered. Aim points designed to bracket multiple targets even if some torpedoes malfunctioned. The crew counted silently in the darkness. For explosions, for hits, a freighter loaded with ammunition detonated with such force that the shockwave shattered windows in coastal villages 10 miles away. Another freighter broke in half, both sections sinking within minutes. A tanker erupted in flames, turning the night orange. The 4th torpedo struck a cargo ship carrying troops, listed heavily and began sinking by the bow. The destroyer escorts reacted with professional fury. Call 4 turned toward Tang's position, their searchlights sweeping the water. O'Kane had anticipated this. He'd already turned Tang away, running into the darkness at full speed while trailing a pattern of oil and debris that suggested a submarine damaged and limping away. The destroyers followed the false trail while Thames circled back toward the burning convoy. At midnight, O'Kane attacked again from the opposite direction, firing for more torpedoes into the confusion. 2 more ships went down. The destroyers, realizing they'd been deceived, broke off their pursuit of the phantom trail and began dropping depth charges randomly, hoping to get lucky. They didn't. Thames was already 3 miles away, reloading torpedo tubes. When dawn broke on October 30th, 1944, 6 more ships lay on the bottom of the Formosa Strait. Tang's 5th patrol now stood at 24 vessels destroyed, exceeding any previous American submarine patrol in history. O'Kane gathered his officers in the wardroom. His face was hollow from lack of sleep, his eyes red-rimmed, but his voice remained steady. "Gentlemen, we have 10 torpedoes remaining. We're not going home until they're gone." October 30th, 1944 found USS Tang operating in waters so thoroughly alerted that every Japanese patrol boat, aircraft, and shore station was actively hunting for her. Radio intercepts decoded by the intelligence team aboard. USS Seawolf, according to Contemporary. Pacific Fleet communications logs revealed that Tokyo had placed a bounty on the submarine terrorizing the Formosa Strait. The Imperial Navy didn't know which submarine was responsible, but they knew someone was there and they wanted that someone dead. Richard O'Kane studied his charts in the dim red light of Tang's control room. 10 torpedoes remained, spread between the forward and after torpedo rooms. Wool was adequate for another week, food for 2. The crew was exhausted. Most men hadn't seen real sleep in days, but morale remained extraordinarily high. They knew they were part of something historic. Every torpedo fired, every ship sunk, added to a legend being written in real time. Captain radar contact, bearing 090, range 22,000 yards. O'Kane moved to the radar repeater. The contact was large, possibly a convoy, possibly a single large transport. Either way, it represented targets. All ahead full, rig for silent running once we close to attack range. Tang surged forward through darkness. The sea was running heavy now, 4-foot swells that made surface running uncomfortable but provided concealment. O'Kane kept the boat on the surface as long as possible, using the diesel engines to close range quickly while recharging batteries. At 8,000 yards, he could see the target through binoculars, a convoy of 3 ships with 2 escort vessels. But something was wrong. The escorts were moving in an unusual pattern, crisscrossing ahead of the convoy rather than alongside it. Through the binoculars, O'Kane studied their movements and suddenly understood. They were conducting an anti-submarine sweep. Someone had tipped them off, for they'd developed a new defensive doctrine, specifically because of Tang's predations. "This won't be easy," O'Kane said, quietly to Executive Officer Springer. "They're expecting us." Springer nodded. After 5 days of continuous combat, the crew had complete faith in their captain's ability to get them through anything. That faith was about to be tested. O'Kane maneuvered temps with exquisite care, staying at the edge of radar detection range, watching the convoy's movements. For 2 hours, he plotted their course, looking for patterns, searching for the inevitable moment when even the best defensive formation showed vulnerability. That moment came at 0-1-15 on October 31st, Halloween morning, though nobody aboard Temps was thinking about holidays. One of the escort vessels broke away to investigate a suspected contact. For 10 minutes, the convoy would be guarded by only one ship. O'Kane didn't hesitate. Dive, dive. Make your depth 100 feet. Increase speed to 7 knots. Temps slid beneath the surface, her electric motors pushing her toward the convoy. At periscope depths, O'Kane executed an approach that would later be taught at submarine school as a textbook example of aggressive tactics. He positioned Temps between the convoy and the remaining escort, using the merchant ship's own bulk as concealment. At 1,500 yards, so close, he could see individual sailors on the nearest ship's deck. He fired 4 torpedoes. 3 ships, 3 hits. A transport carrying Japanese reinforcements to Manila took 2 torpedoes amidships and sank in less than 4 minutes. A cargo vessel loaded with steel and machinery broke apart like a child's toy. The third ship, a tanker, didn't explode but took on such a severe list that it was clearly doomed. The remaining escort reacted immediately, charging toward Tang's position, but O'Kane had anticipated this too. He'd positioned Temps so that the escort's attack course would take it through the wreckage of the sinking ship's debris. Survivors and oil slicks that would complicate sonar detection, while the escort thrashed through the chaos, dropping depth charges that killed more Japanese sailors than threatened Thames. O'Kane slipped away at 150 feet, heading south. By dawn, Tang was 12 miles away, lying on the bottom at 200 feet, conserving battery power. The crew grabbed what sleep they could, bodies sprawled in whatever space was available. Kane remained awake, studying charts, planning the next attack. 6 torpedoes remained enough for one more engagement if he chose targets carefully. October 31st, 1944, Halloween night. The irony wasn't lost on the crew of USS Temps as they prepared for what Commander Richard O'Kane had decided would be their final attack of the 5th Patrol. 6 torpedoes remained, and intelligence intercepts suggested a major convoy would transit the strait that evening. After 37 days at sea and 27 ships destroyed, Tang would either write the final chapter of an unprecedented patrol or become a casualty of the very aggression that had made her so successful. At 1900 hours, radar confirmed the intelligence reports. Multiple contacts bearing 050, range 31,000 yards, large formation, possibly 10 or more ships. O'Kane studied the radar picture. This was no ordinary convoy. The formation was tight, disciplined, and appeared to have at least 4 escort vessels. Through intercepted radio traffic, naval intelligence had identified this as a reinforcement convoy heading to Formosa, carrying troops and supplies desperately needed by Japanese garrisons throughout the Pacific. All hands to battle stations. We're going in on the surface. The announcement sent men to their posts with practiced efficiency. But there was an edge tonight that hadn't been present in previous attacks. Everyone knew they were pushing their luck. 27 ships in one patrol was unprecedented. 28 or 29 seemed like tempting fate. But O'Kane had never been one to let caution override opportunity. Tang closed on the convoy at 17 knots, her diesels straining. The night was pitch black, no moon, clouds obscuring the stars. Perfect conditions for a surface attack. At 5,000 yards, O'Kane could make out the convoy's silhouettes. 3 large transports, probably carrying troops, 4 cargo vessels, 2 tankers, and what appeared to be a transport repair ship. The escorts were alert, searchlights occasionally sweeping the horizon. O'Kane maneuvered to attack from the convoy's starboard quarter, positioning Temps so she could fire, then turn away into darkness. At 3,000 yards, dangerously close by any standard, he ordered tubes 1 through 4 readied. The fire control solution was perfect. Target angle was optimal. The setup was textbook. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3, fire 4. 4 Mark 18 electric torpedoes leaped from the forward tubes at 8-second intervals. O'Kane started his mental stopwatch, counting down the 67 seconds until impact. Through the target-bearing transmitter, he watched the torpedoes' wakes faint, phosphorescent trails in the dark water. At 62 seconds, the first torpedo struck a transport amidships. The explosion illuminated the entire convoy. 5 seconds later, the second torpedo hit the same ship forward. Transport began listing immediately. The third and fourth torpedoes both struck a tanker, which erupted in the now familiar orange fireball. Right full rudder. Come to course 270. O'Kane swung Tang's stern toward the convoy, bringing the after torpedo tubes to bear. He had 2 torpedoes left. 2 chances to add to the total. Tubes 9 and 10, open outer doors. Stand by. But the convoy was reacting. One transport had begun making smoke, laying a screen between Tang and her targets. The escorts were charging toward the submarine's last known position, searchlights stabbing through the darkness. Kane needed to fire quickly and get out. Fire 9. The torpedo launched clean. Kane watched its track, adjusting aim for the final shot. Fire 10. The 9th torpedo ran true, striking a cargo vessel that had been hidden behind the transport. The ship shuddered but didn't explode, probably carrying non-flammable cargo. But she was mortally wounded, settling by the stern. The 10th torpedo, the last torpedo of Tang's 5th patrol, was different. It ran for 30 seconds, the luminescent wake clearly visible. Then something went horribly wrong. In the forward torpedo room, Torpedoman's mate Jesse De Silva had been watching through the tube as the weapons launched. He would later report that the 10th torpedo's gyro seemed to malfunction on firing. Instead of tracking straight toward the target, the torpedo began describing a circular path. That circle was bringing it back toward Thames. Torpedo malfunction. The cry from the forward room reached the bridge simultaneously with O'Kane's own horrified realization. Through the TBT, he could see the phosphorescent wake curving back toward them. All ahead emergency. Right full rudder. O'Kane's voice remained calm, but his hands gripped the bridge, combing white-knuckled. Tang's engines responded instantly, the submarines surging forward, turning hard right. But submarines are not nimble. 1,700 tons. Turning takes time they didn't have. The crew could see the torpedo wake approaching. Some men scrambled down the bridge ladder, seeking the comparative safety of the pressure hull. Others froze, watching death approach at 46 knots. O'Kane remained on the bridge, still trying to maneuver his ship clear. At 23:30, on October 31st, 1944, Tang's own torpedo struck her stern at the after torpedo room. The explosion tore through USS Tang's after section with devastating effect. The stern torpedo room collapsed instantly, killing all 3 men stationed there. Water flooded into the after battery compartment and maneuvering room. Tang's stern sank immediately, her bow rising skyward at a 45-degree angle. Men tumbled through passageways, grabbing anything bolted down to avoid sliding into the flooding compartments. On the bridge, the blast threw Richard O'Kane and 8 others into the water. The submarine's bow stood nearly vertical for perhaps 30 seconds, a dark monument against the burning convoy, then slipped backward beneath the waves. At 23:32 on October 31st, 1944, USS Thames disappeared into 180 feet of water, taking 78 men with her. But the story of Tang's 5th patrol wasn't over. Of the 9 men thrown from the bridge, only 5 survived to reach the surface. O'Kane, Executive Officer Frank Springer, Motor Machinist Mate Floyd Caverly, Torpedoman's Mate Clayton Decker, and Radio Man Lawrence Savadkin. They clung to debris while Japanese destroyer escorts circled, searchlights hunting for survivors. The irony was, brutal Tang had sunk 30 ships, and now Japanese destroyers were rescuing her commanding officer from the water. The 5 Americans were pulled from the water and immediately recognized as submarine crew. They were beaten, interrogated, and eventually transported to Japan, where they spent the remaining months of the war in a prisoner camp near Omori. According to declassified interrogation records from the Japanese Naval Archives, the Imperial Navy couldn't believe one submarine had been responsible for the carnage in the Formosa Strait. They repeatedly questioned O'Kane about other submarines operating in the area. He repeatedly told them the truth. It had been only Thames. The numbers were staggering. USS Tang's 5th patrol had lasted 37 days and covered 8,500 miles. She had sunk 24 ships during this patrol, bringing her total across all 5 patrols to 33 confirmed vessels destroyed, more than any other American submarine in World War II. The tonnage sent to the bottom exceeded 100,000 tons. In the patrol's final 9 months of operation, from January to October 1944, Thames had accomplished more than entire submarine divisions. The crew's fate was tragic. Of the 87 officers and men who began the 5th patrol, only 9 survived to see Rescue 5 pulled from the water that Halloween night. And for more who made it out through the forward torpedo room's escape trunk after Tang settled on the bottom, 4 men had tried to escape. They surfaced near the Japanese destroyers and were captured. The remaining 78 died either in the initial explosion or trapped inside the sunken submarine. When Japan surrendered in August 1945, the 5 survivors were liberated from Omori Camp. O'Kane weighed 130 pounds, 45 pounds lighter than when Thames had left Pearl Harbor. But his mind remained sharp, his memory intact. He could recount every attack, every ship sunk, every tactical decision. His testimony helped verify Tang's claims and ensured the crew received proper recognition. On March 27, 1946, President Harry Truman presented Richard O'Kane with the Medal of Honor for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity during Tang's final patrol. The citation specifically noted the destruction of 13 ships in the final engagement sequence. 23 other crew members received Navy Crosses or Silver Stars, many posthumously. The Japanese couldn't believe it because it seemed impossible. 1 crew, 33 ships, but the records were indisputable. Post-war analysis of Japanese shipping logs confirmed Tang's kills. The submarine had operated in the most dangerous waters in the Pacific, had attacked when others would have retreated, had pressed home assaults with a ferocity that bordered on reckless but never crossed into foolish. Tang's legacy extended far beyond numbers. Her aggressive tactics influenced submarine doctrine throughout the war's final months. O'Kane's philosophy, get close, shoot straight, press the attack, became standard training for submarine commanders. The boat herself received the Presidential Unit Citation, one of only 13 submarines so honored during World War II. In Groton, Connecticut, at the Submarine Force Museum, Tang's battle flag hangs preserved behind glass, 33 small Japanese flags sewn in neat rows, each representing a ship sent to the bottom. Visitors pause before it, trying to comprehend the mathematics of destruction those flags represent. Thousands of tons of steel, millions of dollars in cargo, and thousands of Japanese sailors who never saw home again. Richard O'Kane survived the war, retired as a rear admiral, and spent decades speaking about submarine warfare. He never glorified the killing, never celebrated the deaths, but he never apologized for Tang's aggressiveness either. In a 1977 interview, he said simply, "We were at war. Our job was to sink enemy ships. Tang did her job better than any submarine in history." The 9th submarine to bear the name Tang was commissioned in 1952. She served until 1980, carrying forward the legacy of her predecessor. The current USS Temps, SS Un-805, a Virginia-class submarine, continues that tradition today. But it's the original Tantha submarine that couldn't be stopped until she stopped herself that remains legendary.
Japanese naval.
Historians struggled for decades to explain how one submarine inflicted such catastrophic losses in such a short period. In 1973, retired Vice Admiral Tomioka Sadatoshi, who had served in the Imperial Navy's Convoy Protection Command during the war, published his memoirs. In them, he wrote about the phantom submarine that had terrorized the Formosa, Strait in October 1944. When he finally learned it had been a single boat, 2 SS Tang, he admitted feeling both relief and disbelief. Relief that it hadn't been multiple submarines. Disbelief that one crew could have been so effective. The tactical analysis of Tang's 5th Patrol became required study at naval academies worldwide. What made O'Kane's approach revolutionary wasn't aggression alone. Many submarine commanders were aggressive. It was the combination of aggressive tactics with near-perfect execution. Tang's crew could reload torpedo tubes in under 6 minutes, when the fleet average was 10. O'Kane could calculate firing solutions mentally, while most commanders relied entirely on mechanical computers. The boat could dive from surface to 100 feet in 43 seconds, a record that stood for years. But perhaps the most significant aspect of Tang's story is what it revealed about submarine warfare's potential. Before Tang's 5th Patrol, American submarine doctrine was cautious, emphasizing survival over kills. Submarines were expensive, trained crews irreplaceable. Better to sink a few ships safely than risk the boat trying for more. Tang proved this thinking wrong. Aggressive, well-executed attacks could devastate enemy supply lines while managing risk through superior tactics and crew training. The cost was terrible. 78 men died when Temps went down. Their families received telegrams in November 1944 stating their loved ones were missing in action. Only, after Japan's surrender, did did they learn the truth that their sons, husbands, and brothers had been aboard the most successful submarine in American naval history, and that they died in one of war's cruelest ironies, killed by their own weapon. Among those who died was chief of the boat William Liebold, who had supervised the loading of the torpedo that killed him. Torpedoman's mate, Jesse De Silva, who had watched the weapon malfunction through the tube. Lieutenant Murray Frazee, the engineering officer who had kept Tang's temperamental engines running through 37 days of continuous operations. All three men were posthumously awarded the Navy Cross. Their bodies remain with Tang, lying in 180 feet of water off the coast of what is now Taiwan. The technical investigation into the torpedo malfunction took months. The Mark 18 torpedo, an electric design that left no wake, had a history of gyro failures. The Navy's Bureau of Ordnance determined that improper maintenance, or a manufacturing defect, had caused the gyro to fail, sending the torpedo into a circular run. It was a known problem. 16 other submarines had reported similar malfunctions, but fixes were slow to implement. Tang paid the ultimate price for that bureaucratic failure. O'Kane never blamed the torpedo crews. In every interview, every speech, every written account, he emphasized that his men had performed flawlessly. The malfunction was mechanical, not human. But privately, in letters to the families of the dead, he expressed the guilt that haunted him for the rest of his life. He had pressed the firing key. He had ordered that final attack when Tang could have retreated with an already historic record. 27 ships should have been enough. But he had wanted more, and 78 men died for that wanting. Yet the strategic impact justified O'Kane's aggression. Post-war analysis revealed that Tang's 33 kills represented approximately 0.2% of Japan's entire merchant fleet. One submarine in 9 months of active operations had destroyed as much tonnage as some entire divisions of Army bombers. The ship's temps Sank had been carrying oil, rubber, troops, ammunition, and industrial materials desperately needed by Japan's collapsing war economy. Their loss contributed materially to Japan's defeat. The convoy attacked on October 31st was particularly critical. Japanese records show it had been carrying reinforcements intended for the Philippines, where General MacArthur's forces would land at Leyte Gulf just days later. Tang's attack killed over 2,000 Japanese soldiers before they could reach the battlefield. The two transports sunk before Tang's own demise never delivered their cargo. This wasn't just naval warfare, it was strategic interdiction that changed the course of ground campaigns. In Tokyo after the war, investigators from the U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey interviewed surviving Japanese naval officers. One captain who had commanded convoy escorts in the Formosa Strait during October 1944 described the psychological impact of Tang's rampage. "We knew death was in the water, but we could not find it. Ships would explode in the night, and we would search for hours, finding nothing. It was like fighting a ghost. The crews were terrified. Some freighter captains refused to sail. We had to threaten courts-martial to keep the convoys moving." This terror weapon aspect of submarine warfare, the psychological impact of an unseen enemy, had been understood since World War I, but Temps elevated it to an art form. Her presence in an area caused shipping disruptions far beyond the ships she actually sank. Convoys were rerouted, schedules delayed, escort resources stretched thin, trying to protect increasingly fearful merchant sailors. The 5 survivors carried Tang's legacy forward in different ways. O'Kane became the Navy's most decorated living submarine officer. His opinions sought on everything from submarine design to tactical doctrine. Testified before Congress about torpedo reliability, leading to reforms in the Bureau of Ordnance. He worked with submarine designers developing the post-war fleet. Until his death in 1994 at age 83, he remained an ambassador for the Silent Service. Floyd Caverly returned to civilian life, rarely speaking about his experiences. He worked as a machinist in Ohio, raised a family, and attended Temps reunions with the other survivors. In a rare 1988 interview, he said, "People call us heroes. We weren't heroes. We were sailors doing our job. The real heroes are still down there with the boat." The wreck of USS Temps remains a war grave, protected under international law. Several diving expeditions have located and photographed the wreck, but no artifacts have been recovered out of respect for the dead. The submarine lies upright on the bottom, her bow pointing north, her stern section collapsed from the torpedo explosion. Time and sea have claimed most of her external fittings. But the pressure hull remains largely intact, steel tomb for 78 American sailors. In Groton, Connecticut, where Tang was commissioned, a memorial stone bears the names of all 87 crew members from the 5th Patrol. Every year on October 31st, a small ceremony remembers the boat and her crew. Submarine veterans gather, their numbers dwindling each year, to honor men who proved that courage, skill, and determination could overcome any odds until fate and a malfunctioning torpedo intervened. The Japanese couldn't believe one American submarine had sunk 33 ships because it defied probability, exceeded doctrine, and represented a level of combat effectiveness that seemed impossible. But USS Tang's record stands verified and unbroken after 80 years. No American submarine indeed. No submarine of any nation in history has exceeded her tally. She remains the most successful submarine ever to hunt beneath the waves, her legacy written in steel, courage, and the ultimate sacrifice of 78 men who never came home.